clans. Traditionally, as Indigenous people, it's very important that we introduce who we are according to our traditional system. So I said first, what is my mother's clan? And it is a water clan. So traditionally, my people, we operate in a system we call G'e. So G'e means like family, and it's a traditional structure to organize and to relate to one another. My second clan is, so I said Twadij Ini, that's bitter water. Tsinabilni is sleeping rock, that's my father. Kia'ani is towering house, this is my mother's father. And then Tohaglini is where the waters come together. It's my father's clan. So this is like an area of a confluence. So it explains where I come from traditionally, my ancestors. And it's really interesting because the clans also give an idea about your role in society. So there were 4 clans. Traditionally, a long time ago, our people had these 4 clans, and 2 of my clans are from the original 4. So this is a kind of a leadership clan, and my first clan, my mother's clan, is also as a teacher clan. But because I have 2 water clans, I feel like it is my role to work on water and to protect the water. So I will start my presentation, but I just also wanted to give an introduction to myself and how I came into this work. In 2007, I had, this is when the time the price of uranium went up very quickly. And in the United States, there was this idea, the industry and the government promoted that was called a nuclear renaissance. And so this is a time when all the old mining companies, they already owned land and minerals. They call them their in-place mineral resources, which means this is their money, but it's still underground. And so they came, they wanted to start mining again. And so one of the issues is we live in the desert, and the uranium, the mining that they wanted to do is it would use so much water, and we already are in a place with little water. And so the way I started is fighting to protect the lands where my family is from. So I will skip some of these slides. In 2006 and 2007, like I said, the price of uranium went up. And this is when I learned about the project we call Hydro Resources Incorporated, HRI. Later, the company changed its name to URI, Uranium Resources Incorporated. And they wanted to do what's called in-situ leach mining. In-situ leach mining is a type of process where they inject some chemical solution into the aquifer. They inject it into the earth to extract uranium through a process of pumping in this solution of water and chemicals that will loosen the uranium underground, and then they pump the chemicals. The chemicals will attract the uranium. Well, they will make the uranium mobile in the earth. So right now, uranium that is in the earth, it's not moving around. And so when they would pump in the chemicals, it would loosen the uranium so that it could become mobile. And then they would pump up a lot of water to catch that uranium. And this is a process they call in-situ leach mining. So the water that had uranium in it, they would then dry it as much as they could and then put it in barrels and drive it. The project we were fighting was here in Church Rock area. This is okay. So last night I spoke about the Church Rock spill. If you can see this map, this is the border of New Mexico and Arizona. There's a town, a small city called Gallup. So if you look on a map, you can find the place I am talking about. It is small and it will not be on the map, but Gallup will be on the map. So the spill that happened in 1979 was about right here. No, I'm sorry. It was right here. And the project, the community I will speak about lives here. And the project that I was fighting was about here. They wanted to take the uranium out of the ground using this in situ leach mining process and then drive it in a truck on this little road to this community in Church Rock. So I apologize, the arrow is not correct. This point, it should be here. Crown Point, New Mexico is the place where my family lives, and this is the place where they wanted to process the uranium. And this is what I was most concerned about, because my dad is from this place here, and my mom is from here. So my aunties and cousins and family live in this town of Crown Point, and the water is very pristine and pure, and it's very clean, good water. But what they wanted to do is use that water to process the uranium that came from Church Rock. And so in order to do this type of mining, the company has to deliberately contaminate the water. So in order to get uranium, they have to contaminate the water. And here in Church Rock, this is where they wanted to extract the uranium. And in order to do this type of mining, the company needs a permit, which is called an aquifer exemption. This means they got permission from the United States Environmental Protection Agency to contaminate this part of the aquifer. So they have a permit. It's the shape of their land. This section is 160 acres. I'm sorry, I don't know in hectares, but the idea is this part of the aquifer, if this is the land and you go straight into the earth, that little section of water would be exempt from the federal drinking water standards and different water laws. So the company has this permit that they can contaminate just this part of the aquifer forever. And there is no renewal. Once they get this type of permit, they can use it forever. And that means that the water will always be contaminated with uranium. The good thing is we stopped this project. So this type of in situ leach mining, it happens in the United States, in Texas, and also in the South Dakota area. And so ISL mining is very, very bad for the water. You can never fix this problem. Once you start any type of process like this, after the company uses the area, see, what they say is the uranium will stay in this section of their property, that the contamination will not go outside of the company's private property. And they are pumping, and it keeps the water contained for the time they are pumping, but once they stop, and then the groundwater will start to move, Mother Nature will take control again, and then the contamination will move outside of their private property. So this gives you an idea if these brown shapes are the rocks and the uranium is stuck to the rock. After they pump in the chemicals, the uranium is then loose, it's separated from the rock and can flow through the water. So this is just to respond to your question about the contamination to water. This is not happening in my community, but it is happening in places in the United States and other places in the world. And this is the area that I was speaking about in Church Rock, and this is the area where the community lives. This is the most contaminated area, and the community that lives there, they are still living there, and part of the being an indigenous person, we will not leave our land if we don't have to. So even though the people live between two mines and near an old uranium mill that is closed, they will not leave because this is our home. So as indigenous people, we stay where our families are from. And like for me, right now, I live in the city, but one day I will move back to where my grandparents lived, and this is where I hope to grow old, and eventually this is where I will die. This is just part of being an indigenous person. Some people say, well, if your land is contaminated and your water is contaminated, why don't you move? This is not normal for indigenous people to go to other places. As I spoke about last night with colonization, this was maybe part of the culture of Western European people to go and to take land. And there is a document called the Doctrine of Discovery, which was basically created in the church in the 15th century. It was basically the permission. It was a paper document that says God gave permission to people to go and take land from other people, and that they are not human. This is the beginning of colonization, and this is a document that is still used today to justify the taking of our land, our water, uranium, and other resources. And so it is a very hard thing to try to change this document. It is so old, but this is the same document that was used all over the world to colonize lands. And as many of you know, that Spain colonized New Mexico. And so we have many indigenous people in New Mexico. My people, we are Diné. We are related to the Apache, and we are related to some other native people in northern Canada, and our language is very similar. But in New Mexico, we have what's called the Pueblos, and there's 19 Pueblos, 20 Pueblos in New Mexico. 19 in New Mexico and 1 in Arizona, who are the Hopi. And these native people, they have a similar way of living, that they live together in a community, and so they have these old communities in New Mexico with the old architecture. They still live there today, and some of these communities, they all had Spanish names. So the Spanish did very bad things to these people, and today there is a movement to reclaim their own name, their language, their culture. So the Pueblos were very good at retaining their culture even though the Spanish had come. There's a very famous story called the Pueblo Revolt, where in the 1680 there was a leader named Pope from the Pueblo, from San Juan Pueblo, and he organized a revolt against the Spanish. And so at all of the Pueblos there were the mission with the Catholic priests who was that was in charge and controlling the people. This was the time when there was still the genocide and the trying to remove the people from the land, and the Pueblo people, they did not want this anymore. So what they did, they organized, and in 1680 they had runners go from this pueblo to run to all the other pueblos in the state, hundreds of miles or hundreds of kilometers. And on the same day, they all killed the Catholic priests at each of the pueblos. And the Pueblo people, they retook their land, and they were successful to kill all of the Spanish people who had come in to try to take their land. And this was successful, but only for 12 years. And then after that, the Spanish came back much, much harder with more force, and then killed, and then did what they had to do to retake the area in New Mexico. So this is I don't know how many of you have heard of this revolt. It's called the Pueblo Revolt. Are you aware of this? Yes, this is a very, very, very important part of New Mexico history, and Pope is seen as a hero, a great leader, and they organized this before the internet, before Facebook, and with no cars, no horses. This, to me, is a true community organizer. Amazing, amazing story. And so this is just some of the history, but moving to today, one of the pueblos is the Pueblo of Laguna. This is a map you can look on the internet, and on Google Maps, you can go to most of these places and zoom in very close and see the impact of uranium mining. This is the world's largest open pit uranium mine. You can see how big it is. Here is the mine. The mining company came in and they started to mine in the area where the farming land was for this community. So the people who were living there, this is the desert, so there's not a lot of water. And so when there is a place that has water, it is very important and very special because we say water is life. And if there is a source of water, the people, they use it for drinking, for their animals, and for farming. And what happened is the uranium company started the mine in the farming area, and that became contaminated. And when they couldn't find any more uranium, they just kept getting bigger and bigger until it took this huge space. And the community lives here still today, across just very close to the mine. And so when the wind blows, you can see some of the structures here. You can see some of the houses. And all of this is, they say it's cleaned up. So there was some reclamation, but what happens when you have a mine where the companies say they took out the contaminated soil and then they bring in new soil, this is supposed to be a way to clean, but they take out the most nutrient part of the earth, and so plants, when they bring in the new soil, I don't know where it's from, but plants will not grow there anymore. So you can see here, these are all little trees and vegetation, but over here, there are no plants. And so there's nothing to hold the soil, and so the dust, the radioactive dust, it continues to blow into the people's homes today. And of course, there are many issues with cancers and different health problems. Last night I spoke about Mount Taylor. This is one of our sacred places and a very important place for us. In this community of Redwater Pond Road, this is in Church Rock. The Church Rock community, as I mentioned, is one of the most contaminated in the country. And so this is the homes of the people. You can see the green and the plants around the homes. But after they did the cleanup, the same thing happened. It was just a lot of dirt. And when the rain came, the rain also washes away the new dirt because there's no place to put it. I'm going to just go to show some more pictures, and I don't want to take too much time because I know we are already behind on the schedule, and I think there's many things I would like to share, but because there is not a lot of time, I will just explain one more issue that is some of the impacts to indigenous people in the United States right now. There is a fight that I am a part of. We call this fight Hall No. Hall No is it doesn't make sense when you translate it into another language, but in some of the earlier movements for social justice in the civil rights movement, there was a saying. People would say "hell no." This is a term in English. Hell no is a kind of a response to authority, and so it's a type of protest in itself to say hell no. But a hall is a transport. So I know it's kind of funny, but maybe it doesn't translate. So Hall No is the name of our fight. This is a fight against the transport of uranium. There is the Grand Canyon here in Arizona. Arizona is in the southwestern part of the United States. So here's Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. The borders of these states it makes a straight intersection, and we call it the Four Corners. So this region we call the Four Corners, and we also call the bigger area the Southwest. So this fight is in the indigenous lands of the Havasupai. That's the tribe that lives at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. Wallapai is another tribe, the Hopi, and my people, Dine. And then also other tribes such as Paiute, indigenous peoples, and Ute people. There's several different Ute tribes as well, and then some Apache. So if people ask, when we talk about the United States or we talk about impacts to indigenous lands, the entire United States and of course the entire North America and South America were all indigenous lands before colonization. So we still can maintain, we still say this is our land. The United States might be there. You have these new imaginary lines with the four corners. You have the border at Mexico, but this is a new thing that we as Native people find very frustrating, because our people, we lived here with no lines, but now these lines determine laws, government, politics, and of course extractive industries coming in to capitalize on the lands in our areas, and they utilize the modern government and the modern laws to their advantage. And the laws are written for the advantage of corporations and to extract. Our government as a Navajo Nation was created in the beginning only to sign a contract for coal mining. So this was necessary that the companies needed an entity to have a legal document, because our people did not organize in this way. We had our clan system and our traditional way, but now we have what is called the Navajo Nation, the Hopi Nation or government. So now all of the tribes have some Western type of government system. And so in this fight, the people of the Grand Canyon, the indigenous people, they lived at the Grand Canyon, at the bottom of the canyon, and they used also the top of the canyon. There are over 2,000 uranium mining claims around the Grand Canyon area. In 2012, this area was protected by a 20-year moratorium or 20-year ban, stop to uranium mining. So the Grand Canyon is seen as a special place, not because it's a special place to Native people, but this is a very beautiful part of the American landscape that is now a national park. People like to hike there. It's very famous, for tourists. This protection was not for us as Native people. It was for the tourist economy and, as we say, the environmental movement. So for me as a Native person, I am not an environmentalist. I do not consider myself an environmentalist. I work on these issues because the land is part of our history and it is part of our culture. And as Native people, we do not see ourselves as separate from the land. It is our mother, this is our home, and it is not a fight to go and hike, but it is a fight to protect the land itself and the sacred entities that live there. There are beings, there are things that are part of the land that are not human that we are also trying to protect, such as water and other parts of our culture. So anyways, the Canyon Mine area, the Grand Canyon area has 2,000 mining claims. They are not allowed to mine for 20 years, but there are about a dozen mining claims that can continue. We call it, they are grandfathered in, that they can continue even though this protection exists. And just recently, the president, the Trump administration, is trying to get rid of this ban. So now there is a law in Congress, or new proposed law they want to pass to make this protection permanent. So it will protect the Grand Canyon. However, it will not stop the mining of this small group of mines. And so Canyon Mine is here. This is a uranium mine. There's a shaft that they already dug the shaft, and at the Grand Canyon, the way the water The natural system for the water is that the canyon, the canyon walls are like this. There are springs that come out of the layers of the earth. And at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, these springs are used by the Havasupai people for spiritual purposes. And so their concern is if the mining is happening up here, that the springs where the water comes out will contaminate the water down below. And so this is an issue for their people. It's always been an issue. And so this fight is about stopping the canyon mine, but the problem is the company, Energy Fuels, it owns the only uranium mill here. It's in Utah. This is the last uranium mill in the United States. The same company owns the mill, which is 3 miles away from the Ute Mountain Ute community. So the indigenous people there, they don't like the dust from the mill blowing into their homes, and they also have health problems. It's a very dry area. It's a similar situation that I described in the previous slide. And so this red line is where the trucks will take the uranium. The trucks will be covered only with tarps. So it will be a big truck with the uranium ore and only a cover on the top. And then they want to drive it here to process. Our Navajo Nation government has a law that says no transportation of any radioactive materials. And this red line here, this transport, is all on a state road, a little bit of a city road. The law for our nation does not have jurisdiction over the state or federal highways. So even though we have this law for the protection of our people, the company can still transport uranium. So this is a big fight that we have, and as Indigenous peoples, we're fighting the mine at one end, the mill at another end, and in the middle, we are concerned about any transport. And when we started this fight, I talked to my government, the Navajo Nation, and I said, this is uranium, it's a big problem. Everybody knows the bad things about uranium and what happened to our people. But then I started to explain, we are now dealing with the transport of high-level radioactive waste from nuclear power plants that could go through the reservation on the railroads. Again, our people cannot stop the trains because this is a federal jurisdiction. And I explained to my tribe that high-level radioactive waste from nuclear power plants is the most dangerous, most toxic waste, more than uranium. And yet today, there has been nothing done on the high-level transport. So now these are some pictures. I will just end by showing you some of the slides from an educational tour we did. So Hall No, our organization, our small group, we traveled from the mill. We did a talk to the community about this company, the proposal. We gave them all the information about the dangers and the risks, and we stopped at different communities, starting at the mill, and then we went to the mine, and we had a big action with all of the native people. Here we are doing a radioactive readings at the mill. This is the Ute Mountain Ute people in Utah. They said a uranium truck or some truck. See, the mill takes uranium and it will process the ore to make yellow cake, but the mill only has a permit to store waste on the mill site that is from the mill. So the permission for the company is the waste on their property can only be from the mill. So instead of focusing just on uranium, because there's not much uranium mining happening now because the price is so low, it's not so profitable. The mill takes nuclear waste from other places in the country and they process it through the mill to try to take the uranium out. And this is not to make money on that small amount of uranium, but it is actually just a way to store waste for other companies, because this is a better way to make money, is for them to hold the waste from other sites. So this was the big gathering that we had. This is at the Grand Canyon, and so these are all the native people that I mentioned, the Havasupai, there's Wallapai, there's Hopi folks, Diné people, Ute people, and then we have some Pueblo folks all together, and this is part of the work that we do to organize is to continue to practice our cultures. And so the Havasupai people, like I said, they use the area around the Grand Canyon, and they used to have they continue to have a traditional gathering. And so we were invited, all of us came to join the Havasupai in their traditional event. And this is for the protection of their water and their land, and also, for the health of their community and the future generations. So I will stop there and hope there is, I don't know if there's any time, but that's my talk. So I would like to say thank you for everyone to come and listen to me today.
Gracias. Ahora sí tenéis any questions? Una.
Sí, funciona esto. Simplemente, indemnizaciones, si creéis que a los navajos o a la gente que ha trabajado y la gente que ha vivido en la zona se le ha indemnizado adecuadamente por haber soportado la minería de uranio. Antonio Miñoto nos habló, en Portugal sí que los mineros han recibido indemnizaciones, las familias, se ha considerado enfermedad profesional, en España no. Que eso, como he hablado tan deprisa, por ejemplo, en Andújar, que había una fábrica de concentrados, de los más de 100 personas que trabajaban allí, solo quedan 20 vivos y los muertos pues se los han llevado. O sea, y la familia no ha recibido nada. Aquí no se ha considerado enfermedad profesional, la gente que ha trabajado en Salices, en Salamanca, tampoco. O sea, no es, si han contraído cáncer, no ha sido por el uranio, habrá sido porque habrán fumado o habrán tenido mala vida, pero entonces, si realmente a los navajos os han indemnizado adecuadamente por haber soportado la minería de uranio.
No, of course not. This is a question, I guess, that could, there's many answers. So there is the contamination to the land. The Navajo Nation is one of the only places that is getting some kind of cleanup from the federal government. And so our Navajo Nation has what's called a 5-year cleanup plan. And so the federal government is working in these 5-year periods to clean. On our land, they have identified 523 abandoned uranium mines. And so they put in maybe a few $100 million to do this cleanup. And there are 2 places that they say are cleaned up. One is in Church Rock, which is not cleaned up, and then another one is in the Monument Valley area. And so if you compare this to FSMAN in Germany, I think the annual budget there is about 100 million euros a year, about. So 100 million euros every year is much more than what is being done in the United States. And so this is very poor compensation for the contamination to the land. When we talk about water, water is a sacred entity. You cannot put a price on a life, and the same as water. We cannot put a price on something, the earth itself. We, as Native people, this concept of capitalization or ownership of land it never existed before. So today it's impossible to say this is how much you owe for the water. This is just one example, but also for the workers. In the United States, we have this law. It is called the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. We say RECA for short. RECA is for the compensation to mine workers before 1971. This includes people who worked at the mine, people who worked at the mill, and transporters. This does not include people who worked at the mill who were not miners. So if there was a cleaner, a janitor, secretary, other mine workers who were not miners, they are not compensated. But nonetheless, they also are subject to the exposure to radiation and also have health impacts. The Radiation Exposure Compensation Act will give about $150,000 for one-time compensation, and you can apply again in the future. In order to get this compensation, you have to prove your birth. You have to have papers to say you are an American citizen. You have to have your pay stub. So if a miner today got sick and he wants to get this compensation, maybe he does not have his paperwork from the 1950s to the 70s to say he worked at the mine. And the problem with us as a Native people, a lot of our parents, so my mom and dad, and many of the older generation, they were born at home. They were not born in a hospital. They do not have birth certificates. And so for them to have this paperwork, the birth certificate and the old pay stubs, the old paychecks from the company, if you don't have them, you do not get the compensation. And so many of the mine workers said this is a very racist law, that the request for compensation to Native people is much less, a very small percentage is given compared to the white population. So RICA, it covers the mine workers before 1971, it covers downwinders from the Nevada test site, or people that were at the test site of any US testing. So this compensation only goes to certain people. However, it does not include the people downwind from the Trinity site, and it does not include people who worked at the mine after 1971, or the people living around the mine. So the compensation is not enough, and yes, this is to answer your question. I can probably speak some more. There is a law now in Congress to try to change it, but it never goes through. It never is approved.